What's going on YouTube? It's Tej, back again with another video, and today come back at you with another 2023 NFL mock draft. As promised, I'm going to be doing these once a week. Fun way to kick off your weekend. It's going to be a fun wild card weekend, and hopefully you're looking forward to this NFL mock draft as well as the continuation of draft season. I do have two favors to ask before we get into today's video. One, same thing I asked about last mock. I'm cutting these up into two separate videos so I can elaborate a little bit longer specifically in tomorrow's video. So today's round one and tomorrow will be round two. Do you like that format or do you prefer one single long video? Love to hear your input. The only way I know is if you tell me. So let me hear your thoughts on that down below in the comment section. And then secondly, more draft related here. What are your QB rankings? I am just fascinated to know where everyone is at on this. I feel like most people have Bryce Young as the #1 quarterback. So if that's the case for you, who's your QB2? I think that's where it really starts to get interesting. We'll even talk about that in this first round version of the mock draft. But if Young's also not your QB1, let me see your QB rankings 1, 2, and 3. That's simple. That's all I'm asking. You comment that down below. I respond to every comment. Let's talk about this QB class and how I format these videos down below. But without further ado, let's kick things off with this mock draft. And part of the reason I wanted to do it, it is a different website we're using. One, just to give you a different look, but also the trades are super easy here. And now with the Chicago Bears holding the #1 overall pick, we are going to trade it. And look, I know it's been super trendy. Every mock that I've basically seen since week 18 ended has had Indianapolis moved up to 1. And I think that makes a lot of sense because for Chicago's perspective, you move back to 4, you're going to get Jalen Carter or Will Anderson almost certainly. So I get that. And Indianapolis needs a quarterback. Right now, they're my #2 pick. I think Carolina is just as likely, if not more likely. So this is the trade that I found that works best for the mockdraftdatabase.com. When I looked at the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, it was going to take a lot more than just 2 ones and a second. And I would anticipate it will take multiple seconds, maybe even multiple thirds in the mix as well. So if you're a Carolina fan, trust me, it's going to take a lot more than this, but I think this also works, for their long-term future. We'll talk about that after I make this trade. So boom, now we have Carolina picking #1. We'll go ahead and start the draft. And they're going to take Bryce Young. And the reason I think they have such an onus and the reason I think they're probably the front runner is one, Scott Fitterer still has his job, which, when you fire Matt Rule, kind of feels like Scott Fitterer is going to do whatever he needs to keep David Tepper, their owner, happy. And a trade like this could certainly be what Tepper's looking for. He wants to make a splash. Furthermore, you add Bryce Young to this team. I mean, you got a bona fide one in DJ Moore. A couple other nice weapons, of course. Terrence Marshall, second round pick a couple years ago. A couple nice running backs, up and coming offensive line, defense with some nice young pieces. Depending on who that coach is, that hire plus a Bryce Young, this team could turn around and be really good in the NFC South. And on that point, we don't know where Tom Brady's going and his relationship with Tampa beyond this year. We don't know what the Saints are doing. They're $50+ million over the cap, and we never know what their offseason is going to entail. And then you have the Atlanta Falcons, who are starting Desmond Ridder, and we don't really know what direction long-term that franchise is heading in. So a pick like this not only makes David Tepper happy, I think it would excite the fan base, but man, this could set up the Panthers to rule the NFC South. So yeah, you're moving on from a lot of draft capital, but as much as I may not be crazy about moving up and trading multiple picks for one swing of the bat versus having multiple chances at it, when it's for quarterback, it's a different story, and especially when you can potentially set yourself up to be the top dog of the division moving forward. So I really think Carolina is my pick for the team to make that move up to #1, but Indianapolis is right there at #2. Anyways, let's move on. Obviously, you know all about Bryce Young and why this fit makes a ton of sense, and it'd make Carolina a pretty competitive team right off the bat, in my opinion. Then we get to the Houston Texans, who, Lovie Smith kind of screwed them over on his way out, which, a little unfortunate for Nick Caserio. I think if you give him a Bryce Young, that team's rebuild is fully on the way. But now we're going to add some more variance into this with Will Levis. I still think they're going to go quarterback if they don't move up to #1. And Levis, I mean, it's going to be a risky proposition, right? His floor is way lower than Bryce Young. So you could be looking at Houston in kind of like a situation we see the Jets in right now where they're a quarterback away, right? If Caserio does a good job building that roster and, hits on other draft picks, we could be in 2 years' time if Will Levis doesn't work out saying, man, the Texans are a quarterback away. So that's, again, if you had Bryce Young, I probably wouldn't be thinking or saying that in 2 years' time. But also, Will Levis has an awesomely high ceiling, right? Like huge arm, mobility, has moments in games where the accuracy is there, but also think he's coming from a bad situation in Kentucky. And naturally, once he gets to the NFL level, I think he might be in a better situation where he can play more than himself and get more out of his traits, right? He's a toolsy guy. He's going to go high in the NFL draft. And this is part of why I wanted to know who's your QB2. I'm also trusting my board here. I have Levis over Stroud. This totally could be CJ Stroud at number 2. Right now, I think I'm giving the edge to Levis, given his tools and his traits and the upside there. So love to hear your thoughts on who the QB2 in this class is. Nonetheless, I got Houston taking Will Levis. Move on to the Arizona Cardinals now. And in this spot, I mean, who do you want? I mean, you're kind of the winner here. Let's go Will Anderson. I mean, a team that desperately needs some pass rush, especially with the retirement of J.J. Watt. They need edge rush. They need interior pass rush. So Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, I don't think you can go wrong here. I do think they're also in a spot to potentially trade back. I think there's some interesting propositions. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in this video. But also they've, brought in or expressed interest in Sean Payton, and they're going to try to, they've received permission from the Saints to interview Sean Payton. That's kind of where I thought he would end up. That was my theory. That's on the channel. You can check it out if you don't believe me. But if that does come to fruition, I'd be really interested to see what they do with this number 3 overall pick, because that, if Sean Payton goes to Arizona, this team that felt like it was destined for a rebuild, they might trade Nuke Hopkins. Keep Sean Payton around, you're going to probably keep Nuke Hopkins. And then this is number 3 overall pick, become a Will Anderson. You trade back, get more assets, try to rebuild the defense with quantity over, a really high quality pick here at 3. So that'll be interesting. But nonetheless, hey, if this plays out and you get Will Anderson, congratulations, you're a big winner there. Now we get to the Indianapolis Colts. Everybody's picked to move up to number 1, and quarterback obviously is the thing that immediately comes to mind with that team. They have got to find that long-term answer. I've been saying for a while now that they have an Andrew Luck-sized hole in the middle of that roster. Like when Chris Ballard and Frank Reich in specific were brought on to do their job, then you get the sudden retirement of Andrew Luck. That changed everything about how that roster was built. And I think if you have Andrew Luck, that team is significantly better. Obviously, I'm not saying anything that is outlandish there. But because then you get the drop-off from Luck to a Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Sam Ehlinger, all the bargain shopping quarterback options they've gone down. It just, the roster doesn't look as good, and you start to see those holes a little bit bigger versus having a franchise elite quarterback in there. So this is Chris Ballard's opportunity to take a big swing of the bat. CJ Stroud really impressed me in the college football playoff. Really showcased a lot of stuff that we just haven't seen in his draft profile yet. So I was thoroughly impressed, and now it put me in a spot where I was already pretty confident 3 quarterbacks in the top 10, but Stroud was going to be kind of lingering there, maybe in the back half of 10. We might have 3 quarterbacks go in the top 5, and furthermore, I don't think we're done there yet. So I am going kind of off the wall here. I am trying to do something a little different than what I do in most of my videos. We get to the Seattle Seahawks. I'm taking Anthony Richardson here. Now, Anthony Richardson right now is, based off of what we know right here at this moment, he's not a top 5 pick. But the potential is there for him to be worth a top 5 pick. And, that Geno Smith contract situation is going to be fascinating. If they get a long-term deal worked out here, then, a Jalen Carter makes a ton of sense. Or Will Anderson, whichever those top non-quarterbacks is available if the board were to play out like this. They also could just franchise Geno Smith, see if, he can do it for a second year in a row, or potentially even just trade the guy. But let's just say they franchise tag him and then allow Anthony Richardson a year to sit behind Geno, get up to NFL speed, learn the playbook, all that stuff you hear year over year about rookie quarterbacks. Seattle could give him the timeline that's best for Richardson. So I'm fascinated by this. And if you're a Seattle fan, let me know how open would you be to Anthony Richardson as the 5th overall pick? I'd love to hear your thoughts there. I always have fun picking Seattle and Philadelphia in these mock drafts because they have so many picks, but a lot of times I make one pick wrong and there's fan bases. Let me know how stupid I am. So let this be no exception. I'd love to hear your input. Do you think Anthony Richardson could sneak into the top 5? Do you think franchising Geno works within having Anthony Richardson be his backup? I'd be interested to see if Seattle were to opt into that route. Nonetheless, moving on now, Detroit Lions, congratulations. The Lions are the biggest winner out of 4 quarterbacks going to the top 5. They get Jalen Carter at 6. I mean, this would be awesome. You move Lee McNeil over to the nose tackle spot. Carter plays that interior 3 tech, and you got Aiden Hutchinson. You got Justin Houston looking like a stud. Or James Houston, excuse me. All of a sudden, that defensive line looks really, really good in Detroit. And obviously, they ended the season on a very high note. This pick comes virtue of the Rams. So this is kind of the cherry on top of finishing over 500 and keeping the Packers out of the playoffs. Jalen Carter, best non-quarterback in the class. In my opinion, him and Anderson are 1A, 1B. So obviously, I don't need to say a whole lot here. This pick would be fantastic for Detroit. Next up, Las Vegas Raiders. And they become the biggest loser here. If we have 4 quarterbacks go in the top 5, Derek Carr, the day of me recording, is, posting, goodbye tributes to Raiders Nation. So they definitely be on the outside looking in, and that's not ideal. So in this situation, let's take Brian Brzee. I've been looking for the Raiders to add an interior disruptor for many a year now, doing these mock drafts, and it just never happens. So here you get an unbelievable athlete that I do think is going to go in the top 10. May not have the craziest production at Clemson, but I think the athletic traits are there. The recruiting profile was what it was for a reason. And once we see the numbers at Indy, I think he'll be a lock in the top 10. So it's also interesting. We have Carter and Brzee going back-to-back. The interior defensive line class, I mean, compared to years of the last maybe 4-ish years of NFL drafts, easily this becomes the best IDO class we've seen, at least since Quinn Williams. But even that was one guy who went in the top 10 versus here we got 2 in the top 7 already. All right, next up, Atlanta Falcons, Myles Murphy. I mean, sprint the card in. This team needs pass rush. You can play inside, you can play outside. 6'5", 275, very moldable frame and athleticism. Again, like Brzee, not a ton of production, but I mean, for Atlanta, it's just having those traits is a lot more than what they have to offer right now. I think you jump all over this, and in a couple years' time, they may be, counting their stars that Myles Murphy fell into their lap because he could become that type of dude. It's one of the, even with, how big and athletic he is, I think that comes with a pretty decently high floor. He already stopped the run at a pretty high level at Clemson, so minimum, I think you're looking at a Travon Walker where, go back that Saturday win against the Titans, and it felt like Travon Walker was setting the edge every time. It was just stifling the Titans' run game and what they were trying to do. I think minimum, Myles Murphy could develop into something similar there. But obviously, if you're a Falcons fan, take them in the top 8, you'll run to see that pass rush upside, which I certainly think could potentially be in the cards. Then we get to the Chicago Bears. So this is obviously the difference between the Colts pick at 4 and then getting Carolina's pick at 9 is just like, what does Chicago want to do here? Because at 4, it's like, again, Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, slam dunk, awesome. And we got the draft haul. Here at 9, it's a little more tricky. I'm going to go Tyree Wilson because, again, I think he's a guy that's going to be top 10-ish once we get to April. Awesome frame, right? 6'6", 280-ish pounds. Can win with, the bull rush. He can long arm people. He still needs to find some of the other pass rush moves, but there's still so much raw potential there. This is a Chicago team that also, furthermore, look at this edge free agency class. That will make you want to draft edge in the top 10 real quick. So I think from that perspective, it makes a ton of sense. This is an opportunity to get one of the better upgrades potentially available. But Tyree Wilson does come with a lot of work. But I'd be fascinated to see what Matt Eberflus could get out of a guy like Tyree Wilson. I think he comes with some inside-out versatility. He can be a stand-up outside linebacker. I think he can play that 3-4 DN position as well. So maybe not as glamorous as, getting a Jalen Carter or Will Anderson at 4, but I know the mock draft database.com didn't allow me to get more picks in there because you have to make it accepted by both sides. But imagine how much larger the haul would have to be for Carolina to move from 9 up to 1 versus Indy from 4 to 1. So I think that's a part of the equation. And Tyree Wilson still has as high a ceiling as anybody in this draft class. And this draft class is also kind of complicated. I'm going down a numerous tangents here, but picks 1 through 5, I feel pretty good about. A lot of the talent there, specifically 1 through 4. Right, we're going to see a couple quarterbacks, Jalen Carter and Will Anderson. Feel good about that. Then 5 through 10, not like, it doesn't feel like 2021 where it's like, dude, Micah Parsons went 11 or 12, whatever he went. That's insane. Devonta Smith went 11, so it doesn't feel like that 6 through 10 patch of the draft maybe is as loaded. But that being said, to swing the bat at a potential player like Tyree Wilson, what he could grow into, I think is worthy here. So again, long story short, I think that's part of the reason why. If you get a bigger haul, maybe the difference between 4 and 9 isn't as large as we perceive it. But again, Jalen Carter, Will Anderson would be awesome to add to that Bears defense. But here, we go Tyree Wilson. And here I'm about to piss off so many Philadelphia Eagles fans, and I do apologize in advance. Look, let me just start by making the pick, and I'll explain myself. So Bijan Robinson. Would I take a running back, this high? No, I wouldn't. This is not what I would do. And these mocks, I tend to do a little bit predictive, a little bit of what I would do. It's just kind of a mixed bag there, so I apologize for lack of consistency, I guess. But that being said, running backs go high in the first round. Like, teams still value running backs, right? Christian McCaffrey is a top 10 pick. Leonard Fournette, Zeke Elliott, top 5 picks. Saquon Barkley, half a decade ago, goes number 2 overall. And take it from a Steelers fan who took a running back, or was not happy about the Steelers taking a running back in the first round just 2 seasons ago, right? So I wasn't crazy about that pick. And if you're an Eagles fan, I already see you type in the comments. I know Howie Roseman doesn't draft linebackers in the first round. He doesn't draft safeties in the first round. So why would he draft a running back in the top 10? It's not y'all's pick. This is playing with house money here. This is courtesy of the New Orleans Saints for the trade up last year. So for Philadelphia's perspective, it's like, hey, this is even our pick. And we have Miles Sanders hitting free agency. We have Boston Scott hitting free agency. So we can go get the best pure runner in the draft class. And hey, the NFL over the last 2 years, the defensive trend towards too high looks has been significant. It's been talked about a ton. You got to be able to run teams out of that. So running back value, in my opinion, over the last 2 years has had a tick up in the right direction for their value and their market and their free agency standings, et cetera, et cetera. So because of that, Bijan does at least bring that value to the table. But furthermore, if you wanted to play him, I don't know, 35, 40% of the time out in slot, I think he could do it. I really think he could do it. He's that good of a route runner. He's got that good of hands. He's taking snaps for Texas out wide. Granted, most of the time that just becomes a screen, but nonetheless, I think this is a true 3-down weapon and a true offensive weapon for that matter. So not only are you getting the best running back, you're also getting another weapon in the pass game to go along with A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith, Quez Watkins, et cetera, et cetera. So I know Eagles fans are not going to like this one, but running back, I think Bijan's going to go higher than what media and pundits and draft, analysts want to think he's going to go at. But, because of that, Bijan here at 10 for a team that has 2 first-round picks, I think it kind of makes sense. Furthermore, let me throw out 2 other possibilities before Eagles fans rip my head off. One, I would love to see, again, if Arizona's entertaining trade back options at 3, could Philadelphia package 10 and then whatever their other first-rounder ends up being to move up to 3 and grab Jalen Carter, pair him up with Jordan Davis and then Nakobe Dean right behind him at linebacker, and just have the Georgia Bulldogs team of 2021 just in the middle of their defense? That'd be awesome. I could totally entertain that. Other alternative is, here I had Anthony Richardson going 5. I'm not saying that's going to happen. And, if the Panthers stick at 9, they may take him there. But also, if he doesn't get taken at 9 and Anthony Richardson's on the board at 10, Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman are not keeping this pick. They are 100% going to trade down for some team who wants Anthony Richardson at 10. So plenty of different trade avenues I think the Eagles could go forward with here. But in this instance, I am trying to do something different. I always have a hard time finding where Bijan's going to go. So I am going here 10 to Philadelphia. Eagles fans, let me know why I am wrong. Okay, let's move on now. Tennessee Titans here at pick number 11. I'm going to go with a guy who just feels like a Mike Vrabel dude. Let's go Peter Skoronski. Mike Vrabel, you look at the Titans last year, not this past season that just closed, where they end the year on a 7-game losing streak. Yikes. But a year ago, the number 1 seed, and it didn't make any sense. They had so much of their roster banged up. I think they set an NFL record for amount of players to be on the active roster in 1 year. But they were still the 1 seed. It just didn't make sense. Peter Skoronski is kind of the same thing. A little small, the arm length might not be there, but dude, God, he is just so good in pass protection. He's done it all year long, playing in the Big Ten, like doing it at a Power 5 level. He just gets the results. And I think Mike Vrabel's going to be like, who's the best player? I don't care about all the other stuff. I want the best player. To me, Peter Skoronski checks that box. Furthermore, I've been saying Taylor Lewan to me is a cut casualty. I think this team's looking to free up cap space, especially considering Mike Vrabel is taking over with a large-handed player personnel. I think he's going to try to shed some of the contracts that were misfires, maybe, if you want to put it that way, for John Robinson. So Taylor Lewan could be gone, so minimum there might be a starting job for Peter Skoronski. Or if Taylor Lewan isn't cut, Peter Skoronski is an upgrade at left guard for the time being, and then eventually when you do move on from Lewan, he can eventually take over that left tackle spot, Skoronski that is. So you could have a little Tyler Smith situation, or he could just be an outright starter at left tackle as you cut Taylor Lewan and save some money. So I think it works in a lot of different ways, and he just feels like a Mike Vrabel dude to me. Next up, Houston Texans. I said this in the reaction video I did to PFF's Mike Renner in his latest mock draft, but Quentin Johnston paired up with Will Levis. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, because the body types, the prospects, their profiles are drastically different. And you shouldn't go chasing outliers. There's one Tyreek Hill, there's one Patrick Mahomes. Don't go chasing outliers. But nonetheless, Levis's arm is unbelievable. It's a true howitzer. Quentin Johnston has, I think, 4.3 speed, but minimum low 4.4 speed, and he does it at 6'4", those long strides. He covers a ton of ground. He's great in the air locating the football. I mean, the deep ball connection could be shades of, Mahomes and Hill, if obviously these players work out to their full potential, of course. But also, Quentin Johnston's a great satellite player, so when you have a rookie quarterback, why not have a guy who's awesome after the catch, right? Just throw a little bubble screen and let Quentin Johnston make things happen. Get an easy first down that way. So I think he'd be a great addition for 2 different parts of that offense, especially when you do consider Levis's arm, but then also the fact that he's a rookie quarterback. So I would love to see this pairing come to fruition. Levis Johnston, that feels like something straight out of my dreams. So I had to go with it here at pick number 12. Next up, we get the New York Jets. I'm going back to the offensive line. I know I had Skoronski going first, but that's because, he kind of feels like a Vrabel dude. My OT1 is Paris Johnson Jr. And for the Jets, I think this is kind of the slam dunk way moving forward. They've had a ton of offensive coaching upheaval. And I'm going to be fascinated to see what they do with the offensive line, right? Like Dwayne Brown, obviously wrong side of 30. George Fant, up and down in his career. Mekhi Becton, like former first-round pick, showed promise, looked good when we get to see him, but he's always hurt. And then Elijah Vera Tucker, guard, but he looked good at tackle. So I think drafting Paris Johnson Jr. just gives you that insurance policy that you're probably moving on from Brown, We'll see what the Fant contract demands are, and then I think they end up trading Becton. If I had to, give you an answer right here, right now on January 12th, I'd say they move on from Mekhi Becton. So I think there's going to be a starting job available and open, and I think Paris Johnson Jr. would be a fantastic add. First-year starter at tackle. Last year he played right guard at Ohio State. Definitely looks more like a tackle at 6'6", 315, but has great footwork, great mirroring ability. I'm a big Paris Johnson Jr. fan. He, to me, has the highest ceiling of any tackle in this class. So that's why he's my OT1, and I love the fit here for the New York Jets. All right, moving on to pick 14. Another fit that I love a ton. I mean, Devon Witherspoon. Devin Witherspoon, I keep saying Devon. Devin Witherspoon, to me, is the best man press corner in this draft class. And what does Bill Belichick primarily known for? Man press coverage, right? Like, so this feels like a match made in heaven. Devon Witherspoon allowed 1 yard receiving in press coverage all year long for the Fighting Illini. I mean, how bananas is that? That feels like something straight out of Madden. So I think the production speaks. He may not be the insane toolsy high traits as like a Christian Gonzalez, who I think is going to run 4.3, low 4.4s, or Keely Ringo right around that same time. But also those guys are 6'2" and with long arms. Witherspoon 6'1", 180, so a little smaller, but or 6'1.5" maybe. But nonetheless, I mean, the play speaks. And Bill Belichick kind of feels like a Vrabel, and obviously played for Belichick. Vrabel did. So I think it makes a ton of sense for him to just be like, I don't care, whatever. Just give me the guy who does the job best, and I think that's Devon Witherspoon. And you look at Jack Jones and how good of a story he was as a 4th-round pick. You might be looking at a really awesome pairing there on the outside for the Patriots. Now, I know a lot of Pats fans want wide receiver. Don't worry. I do think there's a plan in place for that, and we'll talk about that. But next up, pick number 15, the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, sorry. Green Bay, more of the same. Michael Mayer. I just think this fit makes too much sense, right? Like, now you have a third legitimate receiving option moving forward. You'll have Dobbs, you'll have Watson, and you have Mayer. No matter what the quarterback situation ends up being, I think that just makes a ton of sense. And you have two guys that have really struggled, Dobbs and Watson, that is, struggled with drops. Michael Mayer will not give you any of those headaches. May not be the most unbelievable athlete, but crisp route runner, a smart football player, and again, he won't drop the football. So that's exactly what you wanted at tight end. Also a plus-level blocker, so I think LaFleur will appreciate that part of this game as well. Next, we get to the Washington Commanders, and here we go on a mean cornerback run. We already had, the Patriots take one here at 14. So, Washington Commanders, they're going to take my cornerback one, Joey Porter Jr. Just love what he's done at Penn State year over year. Just consistent progression, getting slightly better, slightly better, slightly better. Obviously, good genes, son of a former NFL player, 6'2", long arms, playing in the Big Ten. Yeah, he checks a lot of boxes for me, and I also think he comes with man and zone flexibility. Then we get to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to go Christian Gonzalez. I thought about Keely Ringo here. Gonzalez, I think he works best as a man coverage corner, but also his fluidity as somebody who moves at that size gives me hope that, cover 4, cover 3, you give him a lane, he can still operate in that. So I think he does come with some man and zone flexibility, just maybe not as much as I feel, or not as confident as I feel about saying that with Joey Porter Jr. But for Pittsburgh, I mean, who's that long-term cornerback one? I'll sit and wait. We'll be here for a while if we do that. So, I mean, obviously a position of need. Love to go tackle here, but with Paris Johnson Jr. and Peter Skoronski off the board, you could go Broderick Jones, but he's a little raw as a pass protector. We'll talk about him later on in this first round. He is going to go in the top 31 picks, but here I like the value for Christian Gonzalez, and then we'll follow it up with Keely Ringo going to the Detroit Lions. I mean, obviously a team that needs cornerback. I think Jeff Okudah is still a prospect to be excited about if you're a Lions fan. Some up and down moments this year for sure, but this was just his second year playing. Third year in the league, but second year playing, of course, had the Achilles tear a season back. Now you can pair him up with somebody who can legitimately hold his own on the outside. Yeah, Ringo may not be as unbelievable as maybe my preseason hopes were. Preseason he was my corner one. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of put it on display. Hey, if you make this guy work laterally and flip his hips, he's just a 6'2", tall, lanky corner. So does leave some to be there, some to be desired there, working, left and right. But nonetheless, 6'2", they can run in the 4.3s, long arms, and there is time that eventually he can gain some more of that lateral movement. I mean, a lot of people were saying Patrick Surtain gets beat on slants a ton, and I don't know if I saw that once this year, to be honest with you. So I think there is time for this cornerback room to develop. And now look at this run on corners. I think this is a sweet spot right here. Porter, Gonzalez, and Ringo. I don't think we'll see any corners. I'm almost certain we won't see corners go in the top 5 like we did last year. Bad quarterback class in 2022 definitely played a part of that. But nonetheless, I don't think there's a guy that will do that. The Eagles could take one at 10, and that's kind of the beginning of the cornerback window to me. But right there at 16, 17, and 18, that's a sweet spot for value, and all 3 of those teams really need corners. So I don't know if we'll see 3 consecutive corners come off the board in April, but man, I wouldn't be surprised either based off team need, and also I think that's a fantastic value for all three. And we're actually not going too far removed from that. I'm going to go Brian Branch here for Tampa Bay. Sean Murphy-Bunting, a player who's had, bright moments in his career, especially early on, but he has just not overall really worked out of late in the slot. He's an impending free agent. And I think if you were to draft Brian Branch, my thinking is that Tampa Bay re-signed Jamel Dean, who I liked a lot coming out of Auburn, and I still like him as an NFL player when he's out on the field, that is. But if you keep Dean, and then you already have Carlton Davis, those are your outside guys, and then you have Brian Branch paired up with Antoine Winfield Jr., who those two versatile safeties who can both play the nickel, they can be the strong safety, they can also play free safety. I am all for versatility. I love offensive linemen who can play multiple positions, and I love DBs who you can put all over the field. I want to cause mind games for opposing quarterbacks. Of course, I'm not a head coach, I'm not a defensive coordinator, so take my opinion for a grain of salt. Nonetheless, if you were to give me a defense with Antoine Winfield Jr. and Brian Branch, I'd be trying to confuse the hell out of everybody we played week in and week out. So I'd love to see Brian Branch there. Plus, again, I think minimum, he's a hell of a slot corner. And, I know slot corner, you're like, you draft that in the first round? Yeah, I think you do. Honestly, look at how much of an impact Kyle Hamilton has made working out of the slot. And look at how good the Eagles defense has been when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's been on the field. That dude is a turnover-making machine. So I think this is a legitimate position where if you're this, nickel corner, strong safety hybrid, it's worth taking in the first round because they can kind of like what they are in college, be that star backer and just be all over the field and make an impact in the run, in the pass. And hell, we even saw the Rams the year they won the Super Bowl start moving Jalen Ramsey more in the slot. So I think it's a trend that's going to continue here. I think Brian Branch would be an awesome addition to that secondary in Tampa Bay. All right. Let's move on to the Seattle Seahawks. So to recap here, and this is another reason I love, the mockdraftdatabase.com. You get to see the picks that I made prior. So, on a lot of mocks, I've been going Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, and then long corner. All those super long, lanky corners are off the board, and obviously we didn't go Anderson or Carter. So I'm going to do something a little different, but I would still love this fit as well. Siaki Ika. Just go get the biggest dude you can right there in the middle of that defense, 358 pounds, but also bring some pass rush skill sets. This would then lead Seattle into another year where they're leaning heavily on Uchenna Nwosu and Boye Mafe going into year two. So not ideal. And both those guys are pretty small. So maybe even more important to go get a guy like Siaki Ika. But nonetheless, maybe you wait one more year on edge. This is also a deep edge class. Maybe you can grab a guy on day two. But here, I think you add Ika, solidify the middle, try to become a better run defense team. And then you have Anthony Richardson, you have Siaki Ika. I think it's a pretty solid first round haul for the Seahawks. But again, if you're a Hawks fan, let me know down below in the comment section. All right, pick number 21, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am going to do something a little bit different than what I normally do. I love going wide receiver. I love going corner. I think I did corner last time out for the Jags in a mock draft. Here I'm going to go with Cyrus Torrence. I think a plug-and-play upgrade at left guard. And there is, obviously Jordan Addison still available here, but I could also see them going on a route saying, hey, we have Calvin Ridley coming in next year. Let's make sure the offensive line is, tip-top for Trevor Lawrence so we can continue his development and progression. This is another team where if Michael Mayer is available, I would sprint the card in. I would love that addition if they can't bring back Evan Ingram, who's turned his career around at least ever so slightly in Jacksonville, in my opinion. So I think Cyrus Torrence, upgrading the offensive line. And I think, obviously with Trevor Lawrence in mind, that's the emphasis, whether it's receiver, offensive line, tight end, whatever the case may be. Let's just give Trevor Lawrence the most pristine situation he could possibly be in. All right, now we get into a couple of fun teams. New York Giants, I'm going to go Cam Smith here. Now, obviously, wide receiver is a huge need. Don't get me wrong, I understand. Now, I went Jalen Jones, I think my last mock, that or 2 mocks ago for the Giants. And it could be Jalen Jones because I think he has that high potential as a man press corner. He's a little bigger. I think he might run a little faster than Cam Smith. We'll have to wait till we get to Indianapolis for the combine. But Cam Smith, I think right now I would have rated as a higher corner. I think he's really good in off coverage. We'll have to see. I think there's potential for him to be a man press guy. Maybe not to the degree JC Horn is, but I still think that potential is in there. If you pair him up with Adoree Jackson, ideally coming back next year, then, Wink Martindale might have a fighting chance with those man press corners that he needs for his scheme, where he's going to blitz a ton up the middle with his linebackers, and he needs his corners to hold his own. So I think adding a Cam Smith there gives Wink Martindale a fighter's chance. And then we get to Baltimore, and dude, this fit would just be fantastic. I mean, this would be unbelievable. Jordan Addison and Rashad Bateman, ideally coming back healthy. 2 crisp route runners, 2 guys that I could, in a lot of ways, draw a lot of similarities to. I think Addison, maybe a little bit more downfield ability, but he also comes with a little bit more, drop concerns than Bateman did coming out of Minnesota. But now you just give yourself 2 legitimate guys you can win on the outside, on top of having Mark Andrews. And we'll see how this Lamar Jackson situation plays out. Every day that goes by, he doesn't have a contract in his hand. I get a little more uneasy about his long-term future in Baltimore. But minimum, I think the franchise tag comes into play, and he plays 1 more year in Baltimore. And I mean, how else could you make him happier than drafting a wide receiver, right? Give him a fighting chance on the outside, passing through the air. And then this team already runs the ball at such a high rate. Addison can be an over-the-top weapon too. So I think once you start getting those safeties creeping up in the box, Addison can be that over-the-top weapon to make safeties pay and make defenses pay for trying to play the run. So love that fit there. 23 does feel kind of late for Jordan Addison. He's a player I like a lot. But if he were to fall this spot, I think Baltimore should sprint the card in, as I've said multiple times now. Then we get to the LA Chargers, and I'm actually going to state the wide receiver position here. Zay Flowers is a player who's really grown on me. Just such a smooth mover. A little bit small, 5'10", 170, 175-ish. But he's played on the outside. He's played on the inside at Boston College and has put up some gaudy numbers. And part of the reason I lean Flowers over someone like a Josh Downs or Jalen Hyatt or Jackson Smith-Njigba. I know that dude can play on the outside. And if I can for LA, I'm trying to keep Keenan Allen in the slot as best I can. He's never been a guy who wins with his athleticism. Instead, crisp route running and really good agility. That's where maybe his athleticism is shown the most. Guy who can crush the 3-cone, but maybe not the 40 as his thing. Flowers, I think, allows you to continue to do that. You play Williams, you play Flowers on the outside. Keenan Allen mans the slot. And all of a sudden, I feel like that offense for the Chargers is complete. They have speed, they have route running, they have size, they have small, they have a great running back. The offensive line should be that much better next year with Rashawn Slater coming back, and of course Justin Herbert at the center of it all. So man, you add this type of dude, I would love that Chargers offense, and ideally that should put them over the top, in my opinion. I'm not afraid to say it. Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to go Trenton Simpson. 1-year contracts for Anthony Barr and Leighton Vander Esch. I think off-ball linebacker is a great direction to go. I think Simpson, linebacker body, safety skills, said something I've said a billion times on this channel, so sorry if you've stuck around. You've heard me say that way too often. But I think this is the type of play that allows you to play more Micah Parsons at the edge position. That's where I want to see him, right? I want Micah Parsons rushing the passer as much as I can. I think having Trenton Simpson as your off-ball linebacker certainly enables that. Can play the run, can be an impact player in coverage, and especially if you're going to play more zone, which, Dan Quinn, credit to him, has changed up his defensive philosophy since becoming the DC in Dallas, and we see that a lot more. So add a true, great coverage player, really instinctual right there in the middle of the defense. And, the Dallas defense has kind of tapered off towards the end of the year, but I think adding a Simpson in the middle, man, that unit could be terrifying to face. Now we get to the Cincinnati Bengals. New addition to the first round. I've had him in other mocks, but I have not had him in the first round. Let's go Darnell Washington. I mean, this guy essentially could serve as Cincinnati's 6th offensive lineman. He has legitimate pass rush sets, and not just sets, but pass rush wins against Gervon Dexter and another guy we're going to talk about later on in the first round, in BJ Ojulari. So not many tight ends I can say that about. And, furthermore, PFF has him graded as a 80-plus overall receiver and an 80-plus overall blocker. There are good blocking tight ends, and then there's Darnell Washington, a tier above that. So would love to see this type of an addition again. If Lyle Collins struggles at right tackle, Darnell Washington's right next to him, and all of a sudden you have a 6-man offensive line. But he's also a legitimate pass catcher. Didn't get a huge amount of role or a large amount of volume at Georgia, but he's 6'7", he's 260, and he moves way better than anybody should at that size. And he's got soft hands. May not be the most unbelievable, route runner, but nonetheless, I think there's some time to polish that up. And if this guy runs 3 routes, block and release, go to the flat, block and release, run the seam, and then, block and release, sit at the line of scrimmage, run a hook basically at 10 yards, that might be all you need considering the rest of the offense and the firepower it has on display. So would love to see Darnell Washington there at 26. And he's a guy that feels more and more likely every day that goes by that going to go in the top 40, which I know that may be crazy if you don't watch a whole lot of Darnell Washington, but late first, early second certainly seems to be in the cards for Washington. Next up, Minnesota Vikings. I've gone edge, I've gone corner. Here I'm going to go off-ball linebacker. It's one of those other needs that really stands out to me. Aaron Kendricks, wrong side of 30. I think 1-year deal for Jordan Hicks. I don't believe he's signed to a multi-year deal, so he's an impending free agent. Drew Sanders, all athlete. I mean, this guy, 5-star recruit, went to Alabama for a reason. He is one of those dudes. But then he transferred to Arkansas. I say this all the time. Go watch the Ole Miss game. Go watch the Arkansas-Ole Miss game, and you will see Drew Sanders everywhere, but you'll also see that athleticism put on display. So I think this is a good long-term play, eventual Kendricks replacement, but also just somebody who, when Tony Pollard runs out in the flat, you have somebody who might be able to stand their own instead of that becoming a long touchdown. So referencing that Vikings-Cowboys game earlier on. That was one play where I was like, yeah, they need an upgrade there. So would love to see this addition, corner, edge, off-ball linebacker. I think defense is the focus for Minnesota. Then we get to the Denver Broncos at 28, and as promised, now we'll talk about Broderick Jones. I was thinking about Darnell Wright, but the way the board played out, Wright, the offensive tackle from Tennessee, just in case you're unfamiliar, he played right tackle, so seamless fit there, as that's the position I think the Broncos should address on their offensive line. But I think Broderick Jones, he's raw as a pass protector, so maybe that flip isn't too drastic. And furthermore, 1-year starter at left tackle at Georgia, so I think we're early enough in his career and progression cycle to where he can flip positions pretty easily. Maybe eventually does flip back to left tackle and be a replacement for Garrett Bowles, but I think a project worth taking on. Great size, awesome strength, like so many of the boxes you want to see in an offensive tackle prospect. Broderick Jones checks, so don't get me wrong. I just think he's raw as a pass protector, so that's why he's a little bit lower than a Paris Johnson Jr. or Peter Skoronski in my eyes. So that's why he falls here at 28. But I mean, I think the Broncos got it. This would be a great situation. Darnell Wright, Broderick Jones, I think that would be an ideal fit to try to finish off that offensive line for whoever that next head coach for the Broncos is going to be. Next up, Buffalo Bills. I'm going to have JSN be the pick here. This is the situation I think is most ideal. I think the last 2 mock drafts, I've had him going to Baltimore, but going back to 2021, the Ravens' 3rd lowest percentage of 3 receiver sets. So for a guy that I don't know if he can play on the outside, not the greatest athlete, it feels like the slot is the advantage that really kind of unlocks JSN's full potential. Hey, the Bills will run a ton of 3 receiver sets. So I do also want to address Khalil Shakir. Yes, I do. And I liked Khalil Shakir. I understand he was drafted last year, but there was a reason he was a 5th rounder, right? So I thought he should have been a day 2 pick. But that's not where he went. You are what you're what you were drafted at. That's why these free agents who were former 1st rounders always get these 1-year deals, right? Like that's why Evan Ingram too. High caliber, highly touted athlete going to the NFL draft. That's why he continues to get opportunities, and now it's worked out in Jacksonville. So I look at Shakir as a 5th round pick. I don't think the Bills are going to have a hard conversation on their hands saying, hey, we can do better there, right? So let's go draft JSN in the 1st round, and I think he's the guy that is exactly what the Bills need for when Stephon Diggs gets slowed down. Diggs can work every level of the field. He can work inside, outside the numbers. You name it, Stephon Diggs can do it. He's the top 5 receiver in the league, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion. Not going on the wall, going on a limb saying that. But that said, once he's limited and slowed down, Gabe Davis runs everything vertical. I don't think you can run an offense through him. And then you have this rotating door of who's going to play in the slot. Jackson Smith-Njigba with good football IQ, the ability to find a soft spot in the zone, shifty enough to beat man coverage. I think if he's your underneath, intermediate, in between the numbers, secondary option if Diggs gets slowed down and it's not open over the top with Davis, I think that's a nice role for him to carve out. And I think that's kind of the player I'm looking for Buffalo to add. That's why I was really hoping they would add OBJ, because then it's like, okay, now I got 2 legit, separators and route runners and guys who can get open on their own. JSN may not be able to do it with athleticism, but he is a guy who does get open at a high rate. So lean into that football IQ. Keep him in the slot. I do think, again, that's a competitive edge that gives him a huge boost in potential, value in production. So I'd love to see this fit here for the Buffalo Bills. Then we get to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to go edge here. Nolan Smith's a tough player to mock because if he didn't get hurt this year at Georgia, I'd be willing to say he's a top 15 pick. Pretty close to a lock there because, again, recruiting profile, athletic abilities there. He's going to put up some gaudy numbers at Indy. I hope he can participate in the combine because I'd love to see what those numbers look like. But also a team captain at Georgia. I think he checks a lot of boxes, and I think he's a prospect that NFL teams will gravitate towards. That being said, he did get hurt, so that's unfortunate. But high-level run defender at Georgia, and if you're Kansas City, hey, that's a great floor. That's a great place to begin, and that's minimum a safe Carlos Dunlap replacement, because Dunlap, pretty decent against the run, and also, he bats down a ton of passes because he's huge. May not get that with Nolan Smith, but minimum we're getting a high-level athlete who's great against the run. Cool. Guy with high morals, good leader, that's great to add to, but also, if Spags wants to utilize more stunts and twists, I've talked about this a ton this year on the channel, how defenses are just creeping up a little bit more, using more and more stunts. Nolan Smith's a guy where if you get him crossing a guard's face, good luck. I just can't see anybody being able to go toe-to-toe as an interior offensive lineman and slow down Nolan Smith. So that could be another way to kind of unlock his full potential. So would love to see that type of role for Nolan Smith, but minimum, the Chiefs need edge rusher. I think Nolan Smith's the next best edge rusher on the board. So to simplify it, I think that move makes a ton of sense. And hey, if you get his full potential, you unlock him as a pass rusher, I mean, good luck. I mean, the Chiefs are going to be playing ahead in a lot of games. And if Nolan Smith becomes a double-digit sack type of guy, The Chiefs are going to be they're already a powerhouse. They're going to be that much scarier. All right, last pick of the first round, the Philadelphia Eagles. As promised, we're going to talk about BJ Ojulari. The Eagles just, traded for Robert Quinn, a speed rusher, so why not go draft one and have Ojulari under contract for 4+ years. If you want to pick him up for the 5th year option, then you get a 5th. I think he's the exact player they're kind of looking for, and I think he's a nice compliment to Josh Sweat long term as that potential starter on the edge. Also, Hassan Reddick in the mix, guy who really can win with not only his first step and his speed, but true finesse rusher, man. He's got a couple of nice moves, and he's really developed that inside counter because edge rushers that win with speed, they're always attacking that outside shoulder. For the most part, they're attacking that outside shoulder. Chase Young seems to be the opposite of that for whatever reason, but Ojulari's been able to add that inside counter, and because of that, the production has followed suit. He's looked great this year at LSU, and the more I watch him, the more I like him. So I really do like his value here, late first round, and for a team that always prioritizes edge, and I'm probably pissed off some of the Eagles fans taking Bijan earlier. I think this is a way to kind of get back on their good graces. So BJ Ojulari wraps up this first round edition of an updated 2023 NFL mock draft. Be sure to come back tomorrow when I give you round 2, and we can continue to build upon what I've already put on the table and on the board for all these teams. But again, let me know what you think about this QB class. How do you think it ranks 1 through 3? Do you like these, breaking up the draft videos? And then also, who's your favorite team? What would you grade this draft? If this was your team's draft, let me see your letter grade down below in the comment section. I respond to every comment. Let's talk football down below. That is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Be sure to come back tomorrow. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.